All right, hi everybody, I'm back. We're ready for round 2 of the video presentation. Now, if you're coming from or have already seen the video lecture group, you're in for a treat. I told you in there we're going to do a short video over Mesopotamia and city-states. That was actually wrong. We're going to do a much larger video over Mesopotamia and city-states in which we're going to occupy 2 groups with. A couple reasons for this. 1, there's a lot of information that just needs to come out and we didn't want to shortchange anybody. 2, the next time I see you, you have an assessment. I want to make sure we have everything covered before we enter into that assessment time. So, if you bear with me, we're going to do a second round of stuff today in which we're going to cover here Mesopotamia. If you're coming from the mapping group, you have already seen this. A lot of these terms are going to be familiar to you. If you have not, if this is your first station of the day, you do not know what Mesopotamia and the Tigris and Euphrates and all that stuff is. You will. It is on the map, so after you circle all the way around, you're going to get it at the very end. All right, so pay attention, stay focused on everything you got to do. Remember, we have an assessment on Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on which class you're in. You guys are going to do well. I know you are. So stay focused. Here we go. All right, so the very first term we're going to talk about for this little station is going to be this one, Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is Greek. It is not any language before that. The Greeks are the first ones that actually told us about Mesopotamia. In this translation, Mesopotamia literally translates to land between rivers. So what rivers are we actually referring to? Well, if you're coming from the mapping station, you already know. The rivers we're talking about are going to be 2. Tigris, Tigris River, and the Euphrates River, Euphrates. If you know me or been in this class for any length of time, you should be impressed with the fact that I spelled Euphrates right without having to look anywhere else. That's a pretty good deal for me. All right, so these 2 areas right here, the Tigris and Euphrates, make up a part of the world, part of the Middle East, known as the Fertile, F-E-R, I don't know why I'm spelling everything, Crescent. So I'm going to spell this one wrong. All right. This Fertile Crescent is exactly what it sounds like. It is a fertile area perfect for growing crops. What makes it so perfect is the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. Because what's going to happen is, in the days long before we started doing this kind of stuff, there are no dams, there's no blocking of rivers for other purposes, no electricity coming from rivers, obviously. So what happens is these rivers, whenever it rains, they flood. And as they flood, they overflow over large chunks of land. That's actually not a bad thing. When rivers flood, they bring with it really rich soil that's ground that kind of soaks it all up and it gets all those nutrients out of that river and can actually be really beneficial to growing anything there. So in this little area right here, this Fertile Crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates, you start to see really, really large crop areas show up, all the farming areas show up, right? So what we're talking about here is actually, if you're looking at the big map of it all, in between 2 large bodies of water. You have the Mediterranean, Mediterranean Sea, and the Persian Gulf. So if you're looking at your map, you've probably had to locate those 2 things already, the Mediterranean Sea and the Persian Gulf. You've seen the Tigris and Euphrates rivers that flow from the Mediterranean Sea and make their way to the Persian Gulf. And you've seen the introduction of Mesopotamia within those 2 bodies of water. So it's pretty self-explanatory how they all play out. So on a test, if you ever see 2 points or 2 cities or 2 bodies of water or whatever like that, you kind of know what we're talking about. We're talking about these 2 rivers inside of this location, which is in between these 2 things. That's pretty self-explanatory. All right, so let's talk about farming. It's often something that doesn't get a whole lot of hype in terms of being important, but I would go out and say that farming is probably the most important thing that's ever happened to human development. So let's get rid of this and let's talk farming for only a second. So one of the things you need, obviously, if you're going to farm, is you need the weather for it. And if it doesn't rain the way it normally doesn't do in the middle of the desert, which is what we're talking about, you need some other way of getting the crop and water there. So there is your farm. You lay out your crops in rows, but it's only going to be so good if you're actually getting these things wet and need water nearby. Well, you're in luck. You got a Tigris River that runs over there. You got an Euphrates River that runs over there. So when these things overflow, when they flood, all that water is actually going to flood your farm. That's good. It helps you plant soil. It's a positive thing. But when it's not flooding, during dry seasons, you can still get water there. They start digging ditches, long ditches, going from these rivers to wherever their farms are set up. These irrigation ditches are going to bring water to the farms. So it's actually pretty ingenious. We'd think of that like, duh, of course you can get water from a river. But for these early people, that was pretty revolutionary stuff. You can build your farm in the middle of a dry area, bring the water to your farm. It helps you be able to grow crops anywhere. And as we saw yesterday, whenever you have crops that are rising, they have a larger food population, what happens to the population of your civilization? It goes up. All right? Growing populations are positive for the creations of those civilizations. Anyways, that's my farming little piece right there. Hopefully you guys understood that and got that. Remember, any point in time during any lecture, if you don't understand something, you need to stop, get some clarification, pause the video, come find somebody in the room. There's enough people in here that can help you out. Also, don't be afraid to utilize your group. There's smart people sitting all around you. You guys can sit there, you can work out some stuff to make sure you got everything understood. All right, so the final part that we're going to talk about today is actually the good stuff. We've been doing a lot of the leading up to history, but we haven't really talked about any people or places or things or anything like that for that matter. Let's do it today. The first place I want to talk to you about is actually a place within Mesopotamia. It's called Samaria. E-R-I-A. All right. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. In Samaria. Samaria is what's called a city-state. It is a city-state within Mesopotamia. So if you think about Mesopotamia, you think about that land in between those rivers, smack in the middle of that thing becomes a city-state. It's a civilization. It's basically a city is all it is, right? But everybody in the area flocks to that city. So Samaria is that city. This thing takes off about 5,000 years ago. Again, so if we're in the year 2014 now, subtract 2,000, subtract 3,000 years past the year 0, and that's about where you're at. So 3,000 years before Jesus and 5,000 years before us right here, all right? That's kind of the perspective we're going to use. These guys are kind of known for a couple things. First of all, they're the ones who started building large temples. And we are not talking about pyramids, not yet. All right, that's going to happen over in Egypt. It's going to happen just a little bit later than what these guys are. These guys are building fairly simple temples. But some of the temples they build, I guarantee you've heard of, especially if you go to church and you're into the Christian religions or the Jewish faith or anything like that. The Tower of Babel, things like that, all come from this area, Samaria. A lot of the stories from the Old Testament even originate during this place. All right, we're going to talk more about that in the next couple of days. So large temples are known for. Also, this is the time in which religious figures, I-O-U-S, figures, rule. All right, our religious figures, our priests, these guys are the guys that were in charge, all right? Whoever's kind of knowing the most about the religion, they are the guys who are kind of running the show. Now, that's all well and good. They get to stay in the big temple. They get to have all the fun. But there is a consequence. They're not that strong. Kings are going to emerge. And these kings, they're bringing the armies. All right, the kings are the ones that have the power. The religious guys, that's all well and good. They got connections up top. But for the kings, these guys actually bring real-life armies into these places, and they are soon going to gain control. Kings are going to emerge in Samaria. They're going to be the ones that are going to take over until you get competition. We talked about it yesterday. Once you gain wealth, you better start protecting that wealth because somebody else is going to try and take it. It's an unfortunate characteristic of being a human being. If you have something, somebody else wants to take it from you. It's not new. That concept's been around for 5,000 years, all right? So for the Sumerians, they got to watch out because they got a new group just to their north who's coming in to take their stuff. These guys are called the Akkadians. A-K-K-A-D-I-A-N-S. All right. So the Akkadians are going to be coming up on this scene roughly about, let's say, 4,300 years ago. And when these guys show up on the scene, they're not coming with religious figures. These guys are coming with armies and kings, and they are coming simply to conquer. The Akkadians have their little city-state going on. As soon as they conquer Samaria about 4,300 years ago, they create a new political system. That new political system is called an empire. These guys are the very first ones to create an empire in the history of the entire world. These guys, by conquering the Sumerians and by already having access to Acadia, have now formed pretty much the world's largest civilization at this point. It's one ruler who rules over a whole bunch of stuff. But, as you would imagine, the Akkadians themselves are going to get conquered as well. So let's scratch out the Sumerians, let's scratch out the Akkadians, and we're going to enter one more in here. This is going to be a guy by the name of Hammurabi. All right. So, Hammurabi is going to put an end to this whole thing and really create, really create the first great empire the world is going to know. He's going to conquer the Akkadians, he's going to roll through the Sumerians, and all this is happening roughly about 3,800 years ago. I'm not going to bore you with Hammurabi yet. We're going to save him till after our first assessment, but I do want to introduce him to you. I do want you to know he exists. Quick summary. I know I'm way over time. Quick summary. Samaria. As are our city-states, our very first city-states we know about, roughly about 5,000 years ago. Large temples, religious figures, guys who are like kind of running the show religious-wise, the guys in charge. Kings are going to emerge and put an end to all that. So you start having kings in there with large armies in there to protect the wealth of the city-state. The Akkadians come in there roughly about 700 years later, take over the Sumerians with their kings and their armies, and they conquer. They got a good run. They're going to last for about 500 years, I guess, right around there. And then comes Hammurabi. Hammurabi's really going to revolutionize the way we do empires. All right, I'm done talking. I know that's a ton of information between this video and the one you saw back in the video lecture series. So hopefully you took it in. Hopefully you're taking good notes. All this stuff's going to be on YouTube. Go check it out. You have an assessment the next time I see you. So good luck on that. Good luck today. Everybody have a good day.